It is Thursday, March 26th, episode number 175 of Sunday Gold's a Florida State Baseball podcast, now live on the airways here. Arya Masudi and Brett Nevitt. Brett, a lot to get to in this show. Florida State falling to UF in Jacksonville in less than ideal conditions, and then got a big matchup this weekend against Duke. 3 more games in the ACC back at Hauser. Daron Vaught of D1Baseball.com, ACC Baseball, etc., podcast host and ESPN play-by-play man who will be in Tallahassee this weekend on the call for the Saturday game alongside former Seminole Eduardo Perez. He joins us momentarily on this show as well. Do want to thank our sponsors, Alumni Hall and Metro Deli. Alumni Hall has been with us from the beginning. They'll give you 15% off of your entire purchase with the code SG15. Again, SG15 in store or online. Let them know we sent you, and they'll get you 15% off of all your favorite Knowles apparel off your entire order. Metro Deli has joined us this year. Terrific lunch spot over there downtown in Tallahassee on Monroe Street. MetroDeliTally.com. They're big FSU baseball fans, and Johnny Mack, who's a part of the Animals, also resides in that building and does a great job helping run that shop. So with that being said, Brett, I want to get right into it, my friends. Not great for Florida State on Tuesday in Jacksonville. The weather was really, really bad. And, you had wind gusts 30 to 35 miles an hour. It was 55 degrees. It was raining. It was misty. It felt like we were playing a baseball game in Seattle, Washington, or on the outskirts of a tropical depression, right? And both teams had to face it. I was genuinely shocked that the game was being played. But it was not bad enough really to cancel the game altogether, but bad enough to be annoying for all the players. And you saw both teams mess up with pop flies and the wind taking effect. And both teams, I think, had home runs robbed in the game at one point by the wind gusts blowing straight into home plate. That being said, both teams played in it. Florida State loses to Florida 5-0. They also score a run. And I want to be sensitive to the fan base, right? I think it's important. You and I come on here and we talk perspective all the time and how midweeks, they're usually reserved for getting guys opportunities, for getting length out of your pitching staff, for making sure you're in a good spot to win your weekend series, right? And you try to pick up a few, you've got to mash with the offense. And usually it's against teams that if you lose a game, it's not the end of the season. Certainly losing to Florida twice is not the end of the season. It doesn't affect your national seed hopes. It does not affect your standings in the ACC. And quite frankly, it could mean nothing in the end for your 2026 overall season. What I do think it hurts the most is knowing that the rivalry is there and knowing that anytime Florida State and Florida meet up at any sport, that's bragging rights. That's the opportunity to be able to pound your chest on social media, to be able to go to work the next day with, the counterparts that are Gator fans and letting them know that the baseball program knocked off their baseball program or whatever sport the teams play in. Baseball is the most unique, right? Basketball, football, those are your best rosters. Usually they play against each other. Baseball, especially in the midweek, neither team's really throwing their best guys. Now, Florida showed you their bullpen arms have serious octane like they did in round 1 when we played them in Gainesville. And again, you struggle to hit them. I want to be sensitive to the fan base. I don't want them to think that we're going to come on here and say it doesn't matter to lose to Florida. It does matter. Perception does matter. I think recruiting in this state, it matters. Certainly, it starts to really annoy you when it's, 8 of the last 9 series or 9 of the last 10. It feels like Florida dominance for a better part of a decade or more. And that doesn't sit well with a proud baseball program and a fan base that's used to expecting FSU baseball to be superior to Florida. That hasn't been the case, right? In the last 10 years or so with O'Sullivan at the helm. I can certainly feel for the fans that are very annoyed. The casual that show, and I hate to use the word casual because it comes across as negative. Maybe the fan that's not paying attention to FSU baseball every single day, but will pay attention when FSU plays Florida because it is the moment, right? It is the biggest game. certainly not what you wanted there for Florida State. And it feels like it's becoming a trend for the Noles when they play the Gators.
Yeah, I think it's especially frustrating when you feel like you're getting just eviscerated by Florida's pitching, basically. I mean, 34 strikeouts in 2 games is going to make it awfully tough on your offense to do pretty much anything. And you just really haven't put the ball in play much. And in this game, really barely even had any hard contact. There weren't many outside of a couple here and there. Bavaro's single early on, Stetzer's double where he got thrown out at third. And when you're not hitting and you're striking out that much and you compound it with mistakes like Chase diving for a ball and turning a single into a triple in a game where it's going to be a pitcher's duel because of the weather and, dropping multiple pop-ups. And I know both teams dropped multiple pop-ups, and a lot of that had to do with the weather. But for the most part, the storyline in these 2 games against Florida has just been Florida's pitching has just absolutely dominated your bats and just gotten whiff after whiff and has really just gone at you with velocity and also just a really good ability to spin the baseball. And, I was just impressed with every single one of their arms that they threw out there for the second straight time you played them. And yeah, it's definitely frustrating when, they shut you out. And first time you've been shut out this year and first time in a long time you've been shut out. I think it was at Cal last year was the last time that they got shut out. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating. And, it feels like it's not the first time in the last couple of years that Florida's coming off a really tough series. And you feel like you have a chance to kind of put Florida even farther down than they already are. And you kind of gave them some momentum back. I think that's like the second time or third time that that's happened in the last couple of years. So, just interesting to see what you can do in the third game against them. Obviously, the last one's at home, so you hope you can salvage the series for the season. But definitely frustrating to lose another series to that group.
Yeah, and I think perspective's important. And I see Daron has jumped into the studio, so we'll get Daron on here momentarily. But perspective important. Midweeks, they don't change the course of your season a whole lot. It's unique that FSU and Florida play a rivalry matchup 3 times all in the middle of the week. And I think the Noles now are the frustrating part for FSU fans is Florida the last 2 times has come off of a series loss to High Point and then getting swept by Alabama. And then they come and it almost feels like FSU is their right the ship game, get right game. And you don't want that, especially coming off the high of beating NC State 2 out of 3 in Tallahassee. I think Noles fans really wanted it. Maybe I'm the problem, Brett. Maybe I should stop going to these games. I keep attending them, and a lot of the times I go home, drive home, and it's not a very fun drive home. But it's irritating. And I think that's important to be sensitive to the feelings of the fan base. It's like if the Yankees and Red Sox met and, it was a one-off on a Tuesday, that's not going to change how either fan base feels about wanting to win that game, even if it's their number 5 pitchers, right? Like no Yankee or Red Sox fan is saying that was my 5th pitcher or my 6th pitcher. We're resting our best. They don't care, man. That's what this is about. Like, this is what makes college sports unique. And I think losing to Florida always fans the flames of social media more than anything else. And when you beat the Gators, the high is immense. And when you lose to the Gators, it can feel like the season's crumbling, even though you're in shape for a national seed and you're really good on the weekends in Tallahassee. So it is what it is. I got messages all last night, text messages, tweets. We had people coming at us saying, don't say it's not, it's not important. It's just another midweek game. No, it's important. I'll say that. It's important to win games against your rivals for perception, and no doubt it matters. But in the course of the 2026 season, I do think, Brett, your point about playing Florida one more time in a couple of weeks, that's another opportunity for a good RPI victory, even if it doesn't mean you win the series on the year. At that point in the year, your season's evolved, right? You might be coming off of, is it Georgia Tech and Virginia that Florida State has sandwiched? I believe that's true. I think it's Virginia, Florida, and Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
That's murderer's row in college baseball when you're talking about ACC and what a week that will be. So tough to lose. I do think, Jackson Barberi throwing 98, 99 off the back of McNeely throwing 97, 98. They didn't even get to Reitenauer. So That's what they have in Gainesville. They've got octane, plenty of it. For whatever reason, they don't play together on the weekends for O'Sullivan. And right now, that's been an issue on their storyline. I'm going to bring Daron in here, but we're going to finish quickly reviewing the Florida matchup. Daron, there he is. What's up, brother?
How we doing, guys?
Doing great now that you're here. We will turn the page to something more positive. I promise.
Good, because that's how I want to be. That's how I want to be about the Noles.
And we've got a lot to get to. Daron Vaught joining us here of D1Baseball.com, ACC Baseball podcast, ACC Baseball, etc., and ESPN commentator who's going to get his first Hauser experience on Saturday. We're going to look forward to talking about that. But, Brett, before we go into that, Cooper Whited was a positive. Link Jarrett actually brought him up today in me and Darren's meeting with Link. That's something on a midweek, despite a loss, you might have found something there from a southpaw. You don't have a lot of lefty options in the bullpen. Cooper Whited could probably start for you for a number of more midweek opportunities, but no doubt you want him to factor in this thing down the stretch, right, when the games become more important. I thought he looked really, really good against a pretty good lineup.
Yeah, I think you know what you're going to get when Cooper's on the mound, and he's going to fill up the strike zone and compete really hard. I think, something I noticed being there and watching this game, like I don't think I've ever seen someone get off the mound as fast and run as hard as he does for a pitcher. And the ball that he caught over the mound was pretty insane. I mean, he made basically a Willie Mays catch behind the mound on a pop-up that he jammed Lawson on a fastball. And I thought that the fastball actually played pretty well against Florida's hitters. Like, I think most of the swings and misses he got and some of the strikeouts he had were on the fastball, actually. And he was touching 90 a few times in this outing and mixed the slider in as well. So I've just been impressed with his ability to compete. And I think when you roll him out there on a midweek, you feel pretty good about what you're going to get, at least for the first 3 innings and the first time through the order. And if you can get some more after that, I feel like it's just an added bonus on a midweek game.
He spotted his fastball as well as I've ever seen. And I think Tom Glavine showed you back in the day, you can throw 89, 90 if you dot it inside half, inner half, outer half. And then you have a good changeup off of that and a secondary pitch that, a breaking ball that you can land for a strike. Doesn't really matter how hard you throw. You're going to have people pretty off balance. And I thought Whited showed that against the Gators. He's done well, right? 2 opportunities in a row that he's been out there. I think he had no hit. What was it, a no-hitter against?
Perfect through 3, and then kind of lost his command against Bethune in the no-hitter this year.
In the combined no-hitter that the team had. So that's a good development there. Obviously, that game sucks. You don't want to lose to Florida. I don't want to patronize the fan base. I won't do that. I know how they feel. And the only
let me come on and do that, Aria. Let me be the one who comes on. The only thing that
will make them happier is if we turn the page, which is what I would love to do, and talk about Duke, because that is what these opportunities have. Daron, my friend, Brett and I know you well, but for Seminole fans who – I know the ones that are diehards and have D1 baseball accounts and listen to ACC baseball, et cetera, they're very well acquainted with you, my friend. But give us a little synopsis of the Daron Vaught experience that's coming.
Sure. I'll try my best. For those that you described, I'm very appreciative. And if you don't have your D1Baseball.com subscription, get it right and get on board. Subscribe to ACC Baseball, etc. Bradley Smart does most of the heavy lifting. He's a very intelligent baseball person. Lots of good stuff, lots of good insight. I'm based in North Carolina, so I do a lot of play-by-play for teams around here. I had Duke's midweek earlier this week where they had that ugly game against East Carolina until it wasn't, and they got a walk-off home run from Caden Smith. But I do a lot in the area. East Carolina men's basketball, that walk-off was against ECU, so you can imagine how Pirate fans felt about me getting excited about a big hit against them. But that's another discussion for another day. That's a freelance broadcaster problems podcast conversation. Man, happy to be here, happy to contribute, happy to be at Hauser and in Tally this weekend with Eduardo Perez, 2:00 on ACC Network on Saturday. Should be a lot of fun.
How pumped are you to get to work with Eduardo? I've called a game with Eduardo. It's as wonderful as you might imagine. That Sunday Night Baseball that you're
well, that's just it. Like, I mean, you know how this goes, man. This is my first year on like the big games for ESPN, and you get your assignments. And the first one was with Devin Travis, who I love, like one of my favorite people on planet Earth. So that was cool to get to work with him, and I've known him for years. Eduardo, I feel like I know him because I watch him on leadoff spot every morning, right, on MLB Network, and I see him on Sunday Night Baseball. But I've never met the guy. So, you know, there's a little bit of, okay, you're pairing me with your number one MLB analyst. This is cool. This is going to feel different probably. So, but it's in a good way. It's all in a good way. It's exciting. And everybody I've talked to who's ever worked with him or interacted with him says he's the best human being ever. So if that doesn't get you fired up to go to work on a Saturday, I don't know what will.
No doubt. He's elite at his job. And I've never been around someone that you can just tee something up and let him run with it, and he will carry it throughout.
Buddy, we love those. It
saves your breath. It allows you to focus on big calls. And he is a wonderful human being, and I know he's excited to come back to Tallahassee, where his daughter goes to school at Florida State. So it's a bit of a family reunion for him in some sorts, and a daddy-daughter weekend too. So that's pretty cool. Like you said, 6:00 Friday, Florida State Duke. We'll start our preview of the Noles and the Blue Devils. Another ACC tilt Friday, 6:00, 2:00 on Saturday, 1:00 on Sunday. Daron, when we talk about this Duke team, and I do feel like it's a Duke team that we have to lead off with, brand new coach, very turbulent situation last year when Brian O'Connor went to Mississippi State, and then Chris Pollard went to Virginia. That's a really good hire, I think, for Duke to go and get the brains of the Wake Forest pitching operation. They call him Moose, Corey Muscara. But he's got his work cut out for him in year one, right? They lose majority of their roster. He's basically had to put this thing together from scratch in a short timeline, but he's done a pretty nice job in an unforgiving league to be at 17-10 overall, 4-5 in the ACC, and they already have a series victory against the Miami Hurricanes. From your dealings with Duke, what should Noles fans know about what the Blue Devils are bringing into Hauser this weekend?
Yeah, above all else, they're going to bring intensity and a chip on their shoulder, in that this is a team that from the beginning, and Moose has described it as, when he got the job, he had essentially a couple of weeks to put a roster together. And he had 8 is the number he uses. I don't know what exactly that comes from, but it's not many. He had not many guys on the roster slated, guaranteed to play for him in year one when he got the job. So A, you got to hire a staff. B, you got to hit the portal like crazy. You got to hit the portal, right? C, it's Duke. And like with the job that Chris Pollard had done for a dozen years, he had gotten used to the admissions process. The recruiting process is totally different when you coach somewhere like Duke, because you got to, the start of the conversation has to be, okay, how are your grades? Okay, they're good. Are you taking ACT or are you taking AP courses? Because if you're not taking a certain number of AP courses, even as a junior in high school, there's not enough course correcting that in certain cases to get you into Duke. So sometimes you talk to a smart player, you might have a 4.0, but it goes nowhere, right? So you throw that out the window at 10 minutes in. So it was a massive uphill battle that Moose had on his hands just to field a team this year. So not only to do that, but to do it in ways that had not necessarily been done there in the Chris Pollard era. I mean, he's got D3 guys. Pollard had his share of Division III guys. But you guys know the Duke teams of the past handful of years, you can almost certainly count on a couple of Ivy League grad transfers who probably were all Ivy at the corner infield spots or something like that, right? There's not really any of that. Moose has said this is like the least Duke looking team, right? Like they're just it's just this like ragtag group of guys who were out there in the portal, not really all that desired by bigger programs. And Moose is just calling people like crazy and looking at some numbers and some video and be like, okay, who can we get on this team? And so they've all adopted, I say all this to say, they've all adopted this sort of like island of misfit toys identity. And because of it, there's a very like, why not us vibe to it. So intensity above all else. They're going to come in, they're going to compete. It's not the most talented group for sure, but you know, they got guys who on any given day as a pitcher, you hit your spots, you can make it work. And they're gonna want to win, and they're gonna believe in their ability to win. So I think that leads the conversation for this group.
No doubt. And I think the first talking point for me, when you look at the nitty-gritty, Brett, and this is going to be interesting on the weekend, Duke runs the bags and steals bases like no other team in the ACC. They're second in the country to only VMI in stolen bases. They're north of 100 already on the season. And Brett, this is going to be an interesting battle against Florida State's catchers, who so far this season have looked less than comfortable behind the plate defensively. How do you foresee that aspect of the chess match being played in Hauser this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch because it feels like major strength against major weakness to this point in the year. I think at this point, I want to say maybe you've thrown out two runners, like actually thrown out runners on an actual straight steal so far to this point of the year. And Duke's got three guys with more than 16 bags already and 103 as a team and only been thrown out 13 times. So they do it at a high rate and they do it at a very successful rate. And RJ Hamilton has 17 bags. Jake Lambden has 16. Tyler Albright has 18, and Albright gets on base at a really high rate. I think he's already got 34 walks this year, which is pretty crazy. And none of these guys have very high averages, but I think they just try to do their best to get on base. They walk a lot, and then when they get on, they're trying to create havoc and probably try to win some low-scoring games. I'm guessing with Muscara and what he does on the mound from his time at Wake.
Yeah, and I think they're just trying to like muck it up. It's almost like, this is not a perfect comparison, but it's almost like what Virginia used to do in basketball under Tony Bennett. Like they want to shorten the margins so that anybody in a game like this would have a chance, right? So if they can turn a single into a guy in scoring position more often than not, then you get a little cheapy and it brings him in. It's like, okay, that's a run you were not necessarily bargaining for. So I think it's just trying to play within what they have as far as the talent is concerned, because again, and Moose is upfront about this. He's like, look, like stacking us up with a typical ACC weekend, we are the lesser team in terms of talent. But to be near 500 at this point for their sake, given that as the case, is pretty impressive. So I'm interested in them. Like they're fun. I don't know. This is 100% a series that FSU should win, right? And the goal, you don't want to go multiple games ahead of yourself or whatever, but it is a reasonable expectation to be like, okay, there's a high likelihood that if you're an FSU fan, there's a high likelihood we could sweep this weekend. Right. I think that's a fair, reasonable thing to expect coming into the weekend. For Duke, they're just trying to upset that. And if they get one, awesome. If they get two, holy smokes, what a weekend. And they're going to lead our conversation on our ACC baseball, et cetera, next week. Right. So, it should be fun just because, again, it's when you watch a baseball game, you want it to be competitive, man. And the only time that it doesn't for Duke is that with the arm talent that they have, occasionally they can start to get out of the zone and walk some guys. So as long as they're filling the zone and challenging hitters, sometimes that means you get it ripped on you a few times, but they'll keep it within reason as long as they can throw strikes.
And I think, to Daron's point, Brett, it'll be important, I think, for Florida State and something you said earlier to prevent Duke from getting on base. And if that's a few more strikeouts from three guys that can strike out opposing hitters and do it at a pretty high clip each, you need Mendez to prevent guys from being on base, limiting the free passes. Important to play defense behind the pitchers too. And that's something Florida State's been hot and cold with. they've played solid defense at times, but then there's been others, namely against NC State last weekend, where you felt like, oh boy, you're kind of helping the away team mitigate some of the issues of playing on the road in a hostile environment by giving them extra outs. You can't give Duke extra outs. And maybe it's not that the next batter is going to beat you. It might be that the runner on base is going to find a way to be on third from first in 2 or 3 pitches. And now more pressure on your defense snowballs, right? And that could be the type of snowball effect that Duke's trying to put the chaos on you, so to speak, for you to wilt. How do you think that's going to factor from Florida State's pitching staff, especially the 3 starters, because you do know they have one of the best weekend rotations in the ACC?
Yeah, I definitely think that NC State kind of showed a little bit of the game plan against FSU last week of trying to put pressure on the defense and trying to put the ball in play consistently and, try to get West and Beard's pitch count up pretty early, because that is the strength of the team. And you're trying to get length out of those 2 guys every weekend. And you're trying to go from West to John, or usually Purcell, one of those 2 guys, I think. But yeah, I definitely think that Duke you're probably going to see them try to bunt and stuff, I would imagine, with the amount that they run and the stolen bases, that the speed that they have. I would think that they try to put the ball in play and just put pressure on FSU as much as possible. And some small ball will probably be involved. And I think for Beard, last week was just a kind of a really weird start. Like, watching it back, there was some really good, and there was some times where he kind of just lost command. And some of that, I think, was extended innings over and over again. Like, I feel like he was throwing 20 plus pitches into every inning. But I mean, I think there were 7 strikeouts involved in 3 2/3, but there were also 4 walks and 6 hits, and some of the hits were weak contact. So I think you expect to see him get back on track. And then with Moore, you just want to see him continue to throw strikes the way he's been throwing strikes, because I think as long as he's doing that, you feel pretty good about your chances on most Sundays against other teams' Sunday starters.
I think, guys, it matters that the Friday guy for FSU here is a lefty, just simply because you're going to make Duke think twice about it right out of the gate when they're trying to run. And not that they can't just like flick a switch come Saturday and send everybody. But if you get them off to sort of a slower start on the base pads, I think that can have a positive effect for Florida State on the weekend. So that matters. Look, the last time I saw these starting pitchers in person, I can't unsee that. And therefore I'm such a true believer in both Mendez and Beard. So that the former point rings true too. Like, if these dudes just come out and are unhittable this weekend, then that's that on running for extra bases and trying to steal bags. So I think it's an interesting, like you said, there's a game plan that's sort of out there now that Duke can look at. And it's an interesting clash of a couple of things, because Mendez and Beard sometimes can have a propensity to try to throw a lot of swing and miss. It might behoove them to fill up the zone and force Duke to force your defense to make a play. Now that, again, corners FSU defensively to make some plays defensively, because you might shorten up some innings in that way, and therefore you can keep those starters in for a long time, which we know Link has been saying since the start of the year. Like, they need that. They need 6-7 out of those front 2 guys, especially to get the most out of the pitching staff the way it's currently constructed. So, like, it should be, to me, it should be a really, really interesting matchup and clash of strategies in that way.
No doubt. Yeah. Go ahead, Brett.
To the point of starting the series with a couple lefties on the mound, as a staff, FSU has allowed 36 stolen bases and 39 attempts, but Mendez and Beard combined have only allowed 1 in just 1 attempt. So
there you go. So, like, that matters. That really matters.
Yeah, it is interesting. As the weekend develops too, Brett, what do you think Florida State does with its lineup and defensive alignment? We saw Chase Williams get back in the lineup for Florida State last couple of games. They've gone with Shmela behind the plate. We've talked about this, and with Daron on now, I mean, there's 14 guys that can play at Florida State in the lineup, and finding the 9 that they feel most comfortable with, offense, defense, give and take, has been the difficult challenge. And I know Daron called the Florida State Wake series, so he has become familiar with FSU and some of the dilemmas they face in those 3 games. How do you foresee, Brett, Florida State giving guys like Chase Williams, Brody Delamelier, Noah Sheffield opportunities, Shmela and Carnes, or even Frazier, Bavaro, Fisher in the infield, and Putnam, and trying to figure out that mix as we get another weekend into the ACC?
Yeah, I think you're still seeing Link try to figure it out every single day, but I think Tuesday's lineup was the same exact as Sunday, but every time we've seen the lineup struggle, that's kind of then when it gets changed. So coming off getting shut out on Tuesday, I think you feel like there might be some changes again. And also because, Link, I think he got all 3 of those guys. I think Chef, Carnes, and I think someone else also pinch hit in the last inning against Florida. But just seeing Link try to get some of those guys involved. I think Brody also pinch hit in the 9th. That's who the other one was.
Good contact to center into a 30-mile-an-hour gust, blowing straight in at it.
Yeah, and obviously Chase had the play in left, where I think he would like to have that back if he could. And Chase always is playing as aggressive as anybody could, but at sometimes you feel like you just need him to play a little bit smarter, or a lot smarter at times, and just kind of reel it in and play the way you need him to play. And Link continues to talk about how much they need him because of trying to break up the right-handed bats. I think you could turn around and ask, do you get Frazier involved again? Because he's a left-handed bat that could break up all those right-handed bats. But they stuck with the same middle infield on Tuesday again with Putnam and Fisher. So, it still seems like they're pretty stubborn on going away from that, at least for now. My thing is, if you leave guys out for so long, do you kind of start to lose their bats a little bit, like Chef? Like, I know Chef is struggling. I think Chef's over his last 17 or something like that. But, I think the only way for guys to hit their way out of slumps is to be in there and getting at bats. And you saw what Chef's impact was before that. But there's still so many guys that you're trying to get in and out. So I just think figuring out the matchups, who hits righties, who hits lefties better. I still think that they're going to just continue to kind of ride the hot hand. So coming off Tuesday, you might, feel like you got to get some other guys in there like Carnes or Chef or just other guys, but it's still kind of a mess a little bit. Not necessarily a bad mess, but a mess.
Yeah. So here's my thinking. With Aiden Weaver of Duke starting on Friday, I think however you justify the lineup the way that it was against Florida the first 2 times, against Wake Forest, it's probably going to look similar to that, just because Weaver more closely resembles that pitching stuff-wise. Mm-hmm. After that, man, all bets are off. Duke's got, not that they're bad pitchers, but it's just a different look, and they are going to prioritize the variance from one pitcher to the next. So from Weaver, it'll go, probably this low slot lefty joker type. And, they got some guys who aren't going to touch 90 with a fastball. That could cause issues for an offense that has sort of been readying themselves for the high stuff factor for a couple of weeks now, a few weeks in a row now. But also, it could be sort of the perfect formula to get some of these guys involved this weekend, depending on how, obviously, you're going to prioritize it a game at a time. But you get a win Friday, you get up by a handful of runs on a Friday. You start to get those guys some plate appearances against, again, admittedly by the coaching staff, like the misfits, the undesirables, or however you want to put it. Not that they're not capable of getting outs, but it's just guys with less stuff. maybe that's the perfect formula to get, Sheffield in on a pinch hit opportunity and he rips one to the gap and, maybe justifies a start later in the weekend if you get a series wrapped up after games 1 and 2. Does that make sense? Like, you don't want to assume too much, but if things go well enough, close enough to best case scenario, I mean, maybe this is the perfect kind of weekend to get some of that stuff buffed out. And then, then once everybody is hitting a stride and hitting well, then it becomes not bad problem, and it turns into a great problem, which is, I mean, you still only got 9 spots in the lineup, but everybody's hitting pretty well.
Yeah. You know what I've come to learn, though, in the ACC, and Daron, I know you know this better than most. Whenever you think you got it figured out, it always throws you a curveball, and you're like, well, I didn't see that one coming.
That's it, man. That's why I preface everything like, you don't want to assume, but like I'm just going to try to assume a little.
Clemson goes into Notre Dame and is like, we could probably get 2 or 3. I know, Jack on Friday nights is tough and it's going to be difficult. And then you go, oh, we just got swept. Well,
yeah. No, I mean, now we're previewing the Duke series right now, but that's a team on the schedule coming up for FSU that Notre Dame's fun. Notre Dame's fun.
On those guys. Brett, this weekend for Florida State, what do you want to see out of the bullpen as they continue to? They should have everyone fresh and available. Abraham and Purcell were both down against UF. They didn't throw them there. Should be completely fresh. How do you see the bullpen evolving as we're now in the end of March?
Yeah, I think last weekend you got a pretty big answer as who your number 2 arm out of the pen is going to be consistently behind John and with Purcell. I think the way he threw on Saturday, especially being able to go 4 innings and kind of extend the way that Link wants bullpen arms to be able to extend. We'll see how available Stokes is early on the weekend after throwing extended on Tuesday against Florida, but I think we expect to see John probably game 1 again if the game is close. Just I think John was pretty good again this past weekend and just made like one mistake, and Link mentioned that today, I think. But outside of that was basically what we've seen in the past. And then just continuing to figure out after those first 2, do you have a left-handed arm you can trust? And I think the number 1 and obvious candidate for that is Meeble. So I think, we saw him just for 1 inning last weekend. So I think we hope to see him again and hope to see consistent strikes for him and see the stuff tick up like we saw last week, touching a 95. I think if you see that again, you start to get pretty excited about what he can be for you as your left-handed arm out of the pen. So those are probably the 3 guys that I think you probably key in on going into the weekend.
This is the part that I'm least sure of about this team. And again, we only know what we've experienced. That's because I barely saw a reliever that Wake Forest weekend. So I would be intrigued to see more of their relief arms. Obviously, we know Abraham's great. Meeble looked great when he was in, and they've got guys. And it was funny. It was to the point where on Sunday, we do the in-game interviews with the coaches, and before we went on with it, I looked over at Dev and I'm like, is it fair to be like, hey, you haven't used many relievers this weekend? Is that like a concern? Because, obviously guys that you're going to have to depend on at some point, you know what I mean? Like you love Wes giving you a shortened complete game. You love Trey getting into the 7th and being dominant. But at the same time, it was just like, man, as sort of uncertain at times as Link has been about what he's got in the bullpen, it's like, man, maybe you would like to see a few more of these guys get some run. Anyways, that being said, I'm excited to get another look at FSU for that reason, because everything else I feel like I got a pretty good feel on.
No doubt. Let's wrap up with Daron. A question for you. You're our resident ACC expert on this episode. So give us a synopsis right now of the ACC and where specifically, this is a Florida State tailored podcast. Where does FSU fit in the ACC, and give us some storylines around the league as we enter, still not even at the halfway point of conference play yet here towards the end of March.
That's how excited you got me about ACC play. I literally just punched my microphone, unintentional. I had this conversation with somebody the other day. I was at, on Sunday, I was in Chapel Hill to do Louisville, North Carolina in the series finale there. And I was asked about tiers in the ACC, which feels really tricky right now. I know a few things. I know Georgia Tech's going to hit and they're going to score. The pitching has been better than I think a lot of people wanted to give them credit for coming in, although they had established even last year that it was better than the reputation has been. It was just unfortunate for them that when they ultimately could not advance and their season ended, it was the pitching's fault, despite being better for the season. So Georgia Tech is good, and they are what they are. I think we're all aware of that. Drew Burris only hitting 167, by the way, in the ACC, which is like the weirdest number imaginable for Georgia Tech's team.
Good that they have everybody else, huh?
Yeah, good that they're 9-hole guys hitting 500.
Yeah, Bob Lackey and Alex Hernandez and Carson Kurtz are like, hey, you know what? We'll hit 400. Why not?
So, like, okay, I think everybody expects Georgia Tech's in that top tier. I just think with the rotation, with the bright spots in the lineup, and this is me assuming the best out of a Link Jarrett coach team because I've never been given any reason to not do that. The youth in the lineup coming around and rounding into form, like, it is fair to expect that piece of it is going to get better as the season goes on. To me, that equates to maybe the most balanced team in the ACC, because for Georgia Tech and for Virginia, you point to their lineups and you're like, okay, that's Omaha-ish. There's the balance for FSU that for me gives me the most encouragement about them. I like UVA as well. I said way in the preseason after they hired Chris Pollard, I think it's probably an Omaha team. And Georgia Tech, we'll see whether or not they could get there. It'd be awesome to have as many as 3 ACC teams there or more. But to me, that's my top tier. So I think it's the 3 of them. The middle is just like a big cluster of a bunch of other teams. Like North Carolina is probably toward the top of the middle there. I'm still not 100% sold on their new look lineup. NC State could be really good, and I think they are really good. Notre Dame now ranked is great. Louisville has been confusing and obviously needs to figure it out in the bullpen. So, like, they're there, but the offense is good enough. Clemson is kind of a mystery right now, but it's sort of in a similar way to Link. I don't have any reason to believe an Eric Bakich team is not going to be in it toward the end. So anyways, that's kind of like, there's a big middle tier. I really do like the top 3 of Georgia Tech, FSU, and Virginia. That's kind of my feel for it right now. And I'll say one more thing. Don't sleep on Pitt.
Dude.
The Pitt Panthers can score some runs. Yeah. They were just like a couple of outs away, a couple of runs away, either side from getting a series on Georgia Tech, which would have been loud. So it's such a fun conference. It's top to bottom. It's great. Cal is a winless team, but looked great in the non-conference. So who knows what they're going to give us the rest of the way. It should be fun. Should be fun to monitor the rest of the way.
No doubt. I think Mike Bell and Pitt would cry tears of joy if they made a regional, because it feels like they're always close and they're just a couple of wins away, and they go to the ACC tournament every year and they become the darling because they
they get a win or 2 there, and it's just like too little, too late.
You're Daron, and for them to be like, we're in. This is just gravy for us. Lucky for Florida State, they get to play Georgia Tech and Virginia both on the road. And they get to welcome Pitt to Tallahassee as well as Notre Dame. This is, if you look at Florida State's schedule, Daron, it might honestly be the toughest of the ACC.
And I don't know that we would have said that preseason, right? Because like we at D1 obviously look at all the schedules and we kind of like survey it based on preseason rankings. Like, okay, who's got the easiest path? But Louisville's not what we thought they were going to be. Miami's not what we thought they were going to be. So that all fluctuates and changes. So yeah, I mean, given what they've already done with Wake Forest and NC State, given what they have looking ahead, I don't doubt that, man. Like it is a gauntlet for Florida State.
It is. Brett, any final word from you before we wrap up this pod? Any other news and notes, storylines, things you're looking forward this weekend in Tallahassee?
No, not much new from Link today in the press conference. No real injury updates from him. So I don't think that there's anything new of note from there.
He only let us know that, and he's going to be okay with me saying this, they do expect Peyton Manka back at some point this season, which is a big relief for FSU fans who know they need another southpaw and a lefty in that pen that can help out and can eat up some innings with length and give you some there. So very good stuff. I think that's a good 45-minute pod. Daron joining us for the final 25 minutes or so. Daron, enjoy the call this weekend. I can't wait to see you down here, and your first Hauser experience will be a banger. I promise you that. Bradley Smart was here last weekend, and Bradley was like, yeah, Hauser's pretty awesome. And so,
look, man, like, again, as somebody who covers the league, Link couldn't believe it when I told him this morning. He was like, wait, you've never been here? I was like, yeah, some things out of my control, man. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited for the occasion of it being an ACC end game. And Noel Nation, don't let me down. Do not let me down. I expect a rowdy environment and some fun. And no, it should be good. Should be a good time.
Awesome stuff. Well, then we'll wrap this thing up. Want to thank, again, Alumni Hall and Metro Deli for being friends of the program, making this thing happen. Those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to Brett's YouTube channel. Those of you listening on demand on podcast only, Apple, Spotify, Google, anywhere you get it, please subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a review. Share this with your friends. It's been cool to walk around the park and have people shout out Sunday Golds and yell from the top deck, yay, Sunday Golds. And, we love it. That's what it's all about. Pretty special season brewing, I think, here in Tallahassee, again, for Link Jarrett. So for Daron Vaught, for Brett Nevitt, episode 175 of Sunday Golds is a wrap.